Welcome back to another episode of Detections Podcast with your hosts, Exiled, Atreides, and
Understudy 77. Man, we got to stop doing the sloth thing. I feel like that just takes a really long time. Like, I do love that Disney movie. Is it a Disney movie or is it a Pixar movie?
I don't
Zootopia?
know.
I don't remember who makes it, but like, we got to stop doing that one because I feel like it just takes a long time to get through. Anyway, man, how are things? Like, I am fresh back from vacation on the river. It was a blast going kayaking and all that. I actually ordered some kayaks. So
It wasn't just a vacation, though, was it? There was like a special event that it was tied to.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the special event that happens like once every year for people.
I don't know what you're talking about.
If we had the soundboard up, I would totally be playing the birthday song right now for the birthday boy.
Well, that's fair. I mean, it's past now. Like, it doesn't matter. It was really, for me, it was about just getting out. Like, it was a good way to spend a birthday because I got a chance to get out and relax and do all that stuff. But speaking of birthdays, we'll talk about that more in a minute.
Yes.
Specifically, and I'll get to that. So, like, getting on the river was great. We actually ordered kayaks. I just enjoyed like being away from everything for a little while. I needed that.
You did.
Mental health note, like, all of you probably need it too. So if you have a chance to get into the woods or the beach, probably not the beach because I think there's a lot of people there. A private beach, maybe.
Well, certain beaches are definitely a danger zone right now.
Stay social distanced, but like, think about getting away from everything for a while because in the times of COVID, it's super easy to burn out. Like, super duper easy to burn out. What about you? Anything going on before we get to our guest?
I got a kind of a cool announcement here. I know the conferences are all going virtual this year, and I had a talk accepted for the local B-sides here in Portland. It's not. This one's interesting because it's actually a joint presentation with this law student that I know, and we're going to be talking about persistent tracking cookies. Even though on the technical side, we're going to pull it back and have it be more focused for a general audience on the technical side. But it's a combination of a technical understanding of what these things are, how they're used, how it relates to privacy, and then the legislation and policy on the government side about what's currently in place, what's on the books, and what are things to consider for the legal aspect of these cookies as we move forward through time.
Oh, that's super fun. That's going to be a good one. Is that going to be online?
It's going to be pre-recorded. They're going to do it, and then there's going to be a Q&A afterwards with the presenters.
So, like, multiple people, not just those of you in Portland, will potentially be able to watch, and you should check it out. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it because part of it is me trying to do the whole lead thing of taking the technical people in the industry, taking people who have industry akin jobs, but don't necessarily have that in-depth technical understanding, combining the two and helping that to improve both worlds.
Nice. I actually may, in a couple of weeks, have some speaking news of my own to share that I am very excited about, but do not want to jinx in case it falls through in any way, shape, or form.
Totally understand that.
So should we bring in the guest?
I'm excited about this one.
So, disclaimer up front, our guest tonight is a very good friend of mine and also somebody that I work with. And I do feel the need to like actually make the disclaimer that I work with this person, but it doesn't really change the way the interview works. It doesn't change anything. This individual is a great one. I think we're going to have some really, really good lessons for everybody. And I'm super, super stoked that he decided to spend his day with us because, as you mentioned earlier about the birthday thing, it is his birthday and he's spending it with us.
Oh, snap.
So please welcome Sean Porras, the Director of Product Security at Verizon Media. Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you very much, and happy belated birthday to you as well, Understudy 77.
Thank you. So, Sean, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, what that looks like. What's your world?
Will do. Will do. Well, first of all, I wanted to thank both of you for having me on. I've been a fan from afar of detections, and now it's super fun to be here today. So, as Sean, as understudy 77 mentioned,
You
I
can you
am.
can use Sean too. That's fine.
All right, great, great. I am the director of product security and assurance at Verizon Media, and that includes our bug bounty program. And I've been in IT for a while, and so I've done software development, systems implementation, systems integration, some project and program management, and then security for around the last 10 or so years. So it's been a fun ride. Love to jump on my bicycle. I call it my trusty steed, and blow off some steam and get out on the roads, which is fantastic. And it's all about having a good time and balancing the work that we do in the industry with getting to know some great people like the folks on this podcast, and all the folks around in our personal lives too.
So you say a while, but you did just turn like 29 today, right?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. I can't wait to hit 30 and see what those years have to offer me.
As one that's about to leave the 30s, I definitely want to go back to the beginning and enjoy them all over again.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the classic. You don't realize what you have while you're in it, right? You need a little perspective, and then it's too late.
So we've touched on these topics a couple times on the podcast before, but you are an expert. We are not. So what I really want to know, like, let's first start with kind of some definitions. So like, what is ProdSec? What is bug bounty? That I think can help paint the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, totally happy to have that conversation, right? So, product security, let's look at the two elements in the term. The first thing are products that companies are pumping out, and then it's the security of those products across the stack. And so what we want to make sure is that we've got robust products that, are addressing confidentiality, integrity, and availability requirements of the organization around, say, a mobile app, a web app, a back-end application, including, infrastructure and cloud componentry. I mean, it's pretty substantial. So within product security, we've got kind of two notions. The first is making sure that you're building security in, and there's the notion in the industry now about left shifting security in the life cycle. And so it used to be, you would kind of build a product, and then as you got close to the end, you'd have all these assurance activities, and you'd look at the code and you would test it, and you would find these gaps. You have to go back to the beginning. Well, now we have agile life cycles, DevOps, really fast pace of play in how we create products. And what we have to do now is make sure that we're implementing security capabilities out of the gate, building, security by design into our products, and making sure that at the pace of products getting pumped through DevOps pipelines, that we've got security integrated there in a light enough touch to maintain the direction and the velocity of the teams and how they're pumping out products. So that's the left shifted side, and the right side is the assurance component, making sure that as you get close to launch, you do those final gut checks, and you do the O-ring check, as I like to call it, before you go ahead and launch, and make sure you're going to have a good launch. Then post launch, we have a bug bounty program, and the bug bounty program is where we leverage researchers across the globe who bring a great set of skill sets and talents to the table to test against production systems and identify any issues you might have with those systems, and responsibly disclose those to the company in exchange for some kind of reward. And that can be swag, that could be recognition, that could be dollars. And so the bug bounty program sort of connects those researchers to your products and help find vulnerabilities and assist in developing a strong security posture for an organization.
Nice. And we're going to dive, I think, way more into the bug bounty stuff later. But first, I want to dive more into the product security side. So you kind of talk about it at the high level and the two methodologies. But like, if somebody wanted to get into that kind of work or do something like that, not on the bug bounty side, but on kind of the assurance side, like, what does that look like? Like, what is it a day? Like, what really sets of skills kind of compose that kind of job field?
That's an interesting question because you've got, I look for a couple of different kinds of skill sets. So let me paint a couple different pictures. The first picture is someone who is destructive minded about products. So they look at a product and they say, I think I know how I can break that product, as opposed to this is how I would use the product or how I would build the product. That particular person is rare, especially if they also have a software development background. So if you take somebody who's builds architectures, writes code, but then also really thinks about how to break a system, that's a beautiful combination of skills that'll usually be a pretty successful product security person. So, the other side of the house are, so that's somebody who's destructive minded. Then you've got people who have built software for a long time and they now know enough about how software comes together, have been, bitten by some of the challenges that they've had in the past, that they know how to advise a product team on the ways to implement a product securely. So a day in the life there might be, on the front side, as a dev team is thinking through its architecture of its system, you'll bring in a product security expert who will say, let me look at the threats to that system and the assets you have and the threat vectors through that system. And let's look at the controls we have in our architecture to make sure we're architecting the right way. The next kind of aspect of product security is really understanding the nitty-gritty of code.
Well, hold on. Before
Yes.
we get into understanding the nitty-gritty of code, I want to expand on something that you just said because I think it's really interesting. We talk a lot about like threat modeling your organization, but I think what you're talking about is threat modeling a product. And I think that's a really, really interesting approach and something that's definitely worth diving in a little bit more to before you move on.
Yeah, happy to. So, you have, say, an organizational threat profile, right? So you say, what are sort of the assets that are interesting to the organization as a whole, and you have who are the kinds of actors who might be interested in those assets. But then you have systems that very specifically connect towards a pathway to the technical assets. So if it's, data that you're protecting deep inside of a database, deep inside of your infrastructure, the threat modeling I'm talking about is thinking about a malicious actor who would misuse the system. So some of the classic kinds of vulnerabilities that folks might have heard about, from, say, the OWASP organization, the Open Web Application Security Project, that publishes the top 10, and a lot of the compliance frameworks reference OWASP. You got things like cross-site scripting and SQL injection. And SQL injection, for instance, is a way to use the front end of your system to actually dig into your database and either blow it away and affect your availability, or extract data back out of the system that was never intended to be extracted. So we look at that pathway when we're threat modeling to see, do we have the right protections in place to prevent those kinds of vulnerabilities? But these are at the architectural level, so it's like at an architectural flaw level, sort of a fundamentals. Then when you go to code, like we were getting ready to talk about, that's where you're looking at the implementation of that architecture, and you need to test against the real manifestation of those vulnerabilities.
So you're going to have to dive in a little bit probably to OWASP too, because there may be some people who aren't familiar. And I know you're pretty involved with that. So do you want to talk about that a little bit and kind of overview it?
Yeah, totally happy to. So, what Sean was alluding to here is we've got, I'm part of the the board for the OWASP Northern Virginia chapter, and we do, monthly talks on application security, product security, sometimes general security, but for the most part, we're focused on web apps, cloud, that kind of thing. And so OWASP is a not-for-profit organization spun up, boy, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. I'd have to actually look and see when the whole organization spun up. But it was about bringing together a community to develop products and have the conversation around application security. And so this is a non-for-profit group, and they create we create a variety of different products. So we've got, a naturally vulnerable website that you can use to test against. We've got, there's a host of projects. If you go to OWASP.org You can see like this. Have you ever heard of Zap Proxy? It's a dynamic tester. There's the ASVS, which is a way to actually look at threat modeling in your system. Just a ton of projects. But the flagship project is actually the OWASP Top 10. And these are the top 10 vulnerabilities that affect web applications. And this is a way to educate developers and security professionals on the most common vulnerabilities that you can try to prevent in your web applications. And they have fact sheets, they have remediation guidance, just a ton of information on that website.
Awesome. And we will provide links to that stuff in the Northern Virginia chapter, pending that they are available. But I apologize for cutting you off. I thought that was a rabbit hole worth diving down. If you would like to continue on the train of like skill sets and things of that nature, feel free.
Sure. So, going back to the kinds of techniques that people will use. So the first, you look at architecture, diagramming, understanding different architectural concepts and how those components come together. So the creation of systems, the implementation of systems, the modeling of systems. Next, you have the manifestation of the system, both in terms of infrastructure architecture as well as software architecture and componentry on top of that infrastructure. And with infrastructure as code and bespoke code and software composition involving third-party libraries, there is a ton of supply chain and general code that's written that you have to wend your way through to identify vulnerabilities to make sure a system is secure. And so part of what ProdSec does is we run different tools on the code that's written and the code that is ingested in terms of the supply chain. And, that helps us identify vulnerabilities and weak spots in the code. And then we use manual code review techniques to dig in deeper into the code and find places where, there are vulnerabilities that maybe the scanners just, aren't really smart enough to find, business logic bypasses, authorization bypasses, that kind of thing. And then after we've done that in the code, we also know where the code maybe is a little bit softer and spongier in some spots. And so we can look at the runtime and then see, can we, leverage our knowledge of those vulnerabilities and identify runtime vulnerabilities and how we could take advantage of weaknesses in the code to get to the assets that we're interested in.
Nice. So are you able to talk about some of the tools a little bit, like by name, if people are curious, or is that kind of like trade secrety stuff?
No, it's not trade secrety. I just don't want to necessarily endorse particular products, but I can sort of talk about classes of products. So
that would be great.
There are like products that take a look at sort of architecture, take a look at, structuring requirements and being able to deliver requirements into a team's ingestion process. So in Agile, right, you have a product owner or project sponsor. These are people who are, responsible for creating the user, identifying the user stories for their product. And what these tools do on the security side is they create security stories that can be injected into the development lifecycle. So it's just part of their natural conversation for the developers. Hey, they're like a story might be something like, an interested party will come to the website to order chocolates for his wife. And then you can layer in some security requirements. And actually to that story, you say, the user will come to the website to order chocolates safely for his wife using a credit card, right? And you can start to evolve and create the stories. Then you can create technical stories off of that talk about the implementation and make sure that you're using, secure third-party libraries when you're building this product, and that you're ensuring that there's, testing happening at certain intervals as you're building the product, and keep evolving that set of stories. So there's some products that do that. Then there's products that do automated code scanning. So this is, they'll run against repos and scan and take a look at sort of the source to sink of data, other aspects of the code, and, identify vulnerabilities and remediation guidance and be able to hand that to developers. There's a bunch of free products out there that do that, but they do it on a lighter weight capability. So you'll find some very low hanging fruit, but they don't necessarily have some of the rigor of some of the, commercial engines. So you get a commercial engine, and you can dig deeper into the code. And there are actually some stats. I'm not sure how current they are. I haven't looked at them in like maybe 4 or 5 years, but I'm guessing it's pretty similar. And it said, you can find about 17% of your security vulnerabilities by running one code review automated scanner tool. It takes about 4 or 5 to get north of 50 or 60% of the vulnerabilities you can find. So you have to run a whole bunch of different tools in order to, find the lion's share of the vulns. So you got to be careful about what you pick and how.
That's actually really interesting and not something that I knew. That's incredibly interesting.
Yeah, I was really, I won't say disheartened, but when I saw it, I thought, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. A lot of places can barely afford, the single enterprise tool because they're moderately expensive. And then they think you have to have, 4 or 5 of them is kind of insane. But you can combine some open source tools with, like there's one, for instance, find bugs, and there's find sec bugs. And so that's, you can just use that and find an initial set. A lot of people are using products, and again, I'm not necessarily endorsing these, but something like, SonarQube in the DevOps pipeline, where it's got, again, some of those lightweight scans. And then you can also then custom configure some of the enterprise scanners, so you can have, deep rules that know how you build software in your company, and it can find, vulnerabilities that all the other scanners can't find. So you combine some of those tools as you can afford them and as you can manage them at the enterprise level with manual code review techniques. And so this is where you take a look at, how you can apply the staff that you have in the product security area to the number of the number of products that you have, and, apply the manual code review techniques and say a code review runbook and some, manual scripts to identify, credentials in code or that kind of a thing. So that's on the code review side. And then you've got the dynamic scanning capability. And the one thing most people have heard about, if you're going to pay a little bit of money for best bang for your buck, is probably Burp Suite or Burp Suite Pro. There's an enterprise version, but that's a great tool, and that's kind of a tool of the trade to do runtime testing of your systems. I mentioned OWASP has ZAP, but these are dynamic scanners that run fuzzing through fields and all kinds of different injection attempts and other configuration tests, and spit back what's happening with your runtime environment. And then there's software composition analysis, which takes a look. There's the code that you wrote, but right now we ingest so much other code into our environments, into our products, that we really need to understand the vulnerabilities there. Things like, actually, I'm not even going to mention some of those, but there are so many vulnerable libraries out there, and you've just got to be really careful about making sure what you're ingesting into your products and keeping up to date with those and keeping them patched. And then there's all the vulnerability management stuff that's sort of outside of directly of product security, but this is making sure you're scanning, your cloud and native infrastructure to make sure that, at the infrastructure layer, you've got the right protections and the right configurations before you launch.
So all I have to say is I really appreciate you bringing this home for me with an example that I am personally very familiar with, because I do indeed order my wife a lot of chocolate on the internet, especially when I screw something up.
There you go. Right. It's a random example on OWASP had the Juice Shop application. So that's, I was trying to.
The chocolate one works way better for me.
Especially
I can relate to that.
February 10th, February 12th, right? You got to get on there and make sure you get your chocolates on time and you do it securely.
Right. So I had a really nice pivot, and I was going to pivot and say, well, with all this capability and having all this capability, then you start to get into the kind of the bug bounty thing. Like, why do you need that with all this capability? But then you go and tell me that with 4 or 5 products, you can only catch 50% of your bugs. So you ruined my pivot in a good way, but still, why do the bug bounty thing? What's the benefit?
I am sorry for ruining your pivot.
I will accept your apology.
I did not mean to do that.
No, but you ruined it in a good way, though, because you gave really good information. It just poked a hole in my pivot.
Well, and if you combine it with sort of the reality, which is, most there's very few companies, honestly, that can staff, can do the right amount of work for the right amount of time with the right amount of people. People are hard to find. It's tough. And so, when you look at Bug Bounty, you say, okay, let's say you've got a tremendous product security team. Let's say you're an enormous organization, maybe you have 40 people in product security. And let's say in that enormous organization, to have 40 people, you probably have thousands of applications. And those 40 people only know so many languages, so many frameworks, and so many techniques. Even, new techniques they can ingest per unit week. How much can you learn? In the meantime, if you look at sort of the bug bounty world, there are hundreds of thousands, if not more, researchers out there attempting to conduct research and hack on products, ethically. And they can bring a variety of skill sets that you may not have in, say, your large 40-person ProdSec organization. So that's where Bug Bounty, adds extreme value, both in bringing sort of the volume of people who can take a look at your products, the skill sets they can bring to bear, and the timing that they have. I mean, there are some people who literally might sit down for 3 months trying to find a bug on a product, and eventually they might find it. The staff, Sean, you think about somebody on your team, say, who has 3 months to look at one thing dedicated.
Nobody.
Weekends too, right? So, this is somebody super eager, and eventually if they find something, it's so exciting for them, but also, it's something that would have been pretty hard for us to potentially find, within a ProdSec function. So I look at it as a sort of a belt and suspenders approach to security. And in fact, bug bounty researchers are almost like a federated version of the product security capability I have internally. So, I love researchers.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning because, as we talk about bug bounty, if memory serves, congratulations are in order because you guys are a top program, or Verizon Media is a top program for like 2 years running. I guess I'm included in that too, so it sounds a little less impressive. Like it sounds like I'm boasting about my own company, but top program for like 2 years running. Like how do you do that? Like how does that happen? Because there's so many different platforms, so many different programs, so many different hackers, right? Like how do you attract the talent to come hack on you?
There's a combination of things. I mean, a bug bounty program has, a handful of characteristics really, right? The first is what kind of scope do you have? What kind of products do you have? How interesting is it? How varied is it, right? That's the first element that I think, researchers take a look at. The second is, are you competitive in terms of, the reward system, and is it worth their time to spend time looking for bugs on your platform? If a platform launches and it say, hey, we're gonna give you a t-shirt for criticals, that those researchers might take a look at other programs and likely will. The third aspect is sort of establishing a community, right? You can do that through live events where you get to meet the researchers in person and work with them side by side on some scope in person. Obviously, that's different now in the COVID world. We have to go virtual for those kinds of things. But creating a community between the company's bug bounty program and security function and the researchers, such that it's got that sense of collaboration and mutual professional respect. So I think that's a really key element. And the last piece is sort of being consistent and fair and having an operational process model that ensures the experience a researcher has with your program, today with person A is the same kind of experience they'll have 6 months from now with person B. And if you can establish that, then there's sort of a credibility to your program and a realization that you'll be treated fairly. And then you add in the element of respect and scope and the proper rewards, and then you have a pretty healthy, thriving program.
It's really interesting to talk about respect when you talk about that, because one of my core tenets of leadership is this concept that like you have partners, you don't have underlings, and it's all about partnerships and treating people as equals. And it's I have to imagine the same when you come into that kind of a program where a lot of people may treat researchers like, oh, well, you did your thing. Here's your check. Go away. Rather than treating them like a partner and extension of the team where you're really working with them. And I have to assume that probably pays off in a big way. Like, any thoughts on that line?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, and we've got there's so many people who they're coming from all ages, all walks of life, all experience sets. And when they submit a bug on the platform, you don't necessarily know, what their background is. I mean, they could, some folks own security companies. Others have been, in IT for 20 years and know infrastructure backwards and forwards and know how to test for certain vulnerabilities and do it in their free time. Others are full-time bug bounty hunters, and that's how they make their living. And then others are brand new and they just submitted their very first bug, super excited. Hopefully it's a legit bug. Sometimes they're duplicates, and so they're really excited. They've got something that one of the researchers we love to work with, Stoke, he talks about, which is bug fever.
Man, I love Stoke. He's great.
He is. He's so awesome, and he's doing great things for the community. But he mentioned this thing called bug fever on a panel we were doing together, and it really resonated with me. The fact that on the researcher side, you submit the bug and you could barely sleep. You're just so excited and you're refreshing, trying to see what's happening with the bug. And, understanding that person could be so excited on the other side of the screen, we want to respect that and triage as quickly as we can, provide feedback, about the bug. If it's great bug, we love to thank the researchers and say, hey, that was an amazing find, like good. That's a great job. Congratulations. Sometimes, our CISO will even jump in and thank a researcher, which I think is just awesome. Just shows again that respect that the program has for the researcher community. But by the same token, they could be all excited and the next morning find out that the bug was a duplicate and there's no dollars. It's already been found, and it's just super frustrating for researchers. And in fact, some researchers burn out after working so hard and feverishly trying to pop a bug and only to find out it's a duplicate or that they just couldn't get the bug to pop so that they could submit a report.
Sure. But you see that community a lot in kind of the live hacking events too, which is fun to dive into. But I want to table that for, no, I lost my other train of thought. I'm sure I'll come back to it. So let's talk about it. Cause you see it in the live hacking events with like the show and tells and the awards and that kind of stuff that takes place too, where these individuals are getting serious recognition. And I know you're really into the live hacking events. Like, how has that kind of affected the program? Like bringing people together and doing it that way?
I gotta say the live events are just so unbelievably rewarding because it's this concentrated moment of bug bounty interaction where, for the live events, again, pre-COVID, we would fly researchers in. It's a subset based on sort of just overall skill set, performance, give back to the community. And everybody really just kind of has an opportunity to bond over, this common objective. So, you release a set of scope in your program. So a set of applications that could be tested on, and you spend some time breaking bread with the researchers, having some drinks and just getting to know each other, and you put handles to names to faces, and suddenly everybody's a little bit more real, and that person behind the screen that you might have been arguing with a month ago, you now know what they look like, and you've hoisted a drink and cheers and that kind of thing, and it all kind of culminates in these live events where they're just a couple of days where you spend together and, go through this hacking process. And at the end, pick the top bugs, the most interesting or creative bugs. And then there's an opportunity. And this is the most popular aspect of a live event, is this ability to do what you referenced, which is show and tell, where literally, the researcher gets up to the front of the room and they built a little presentation and maybe a video clip, and they walk through the research that they did and what they were able to find. And I'm telling you, you can hear a pin drop in the rest of the room as all the other researchers are watching and paying attention. And then at the end, there's claps and laughter. It's just, it's a great moment. And then of course there's, awards where, folks get to be identified as either the most valuable hacker or the exterminator, or, somebody. We even, So one time we had an award for the person who got the most dupes because it was just an unbelievable number of duplicates. The poor person was walking away after so much research. So we gave them a little award to recognize their efforts.
It's I will never forget my first live hacking event in Vegas at DEF CON last year. I remember you going around and introducing me to some of the hackers and what I do, and they just look at me and they'd be like, "Oh man, you must hate us." And I was like, "No, not at all. Like, this is a partnership. Like, I'd rather it be you than somebody else." But it's, rather it be you doing it, non-maliciously in so many senses. But they're such a cool experience, and I'm so glad to have gotten to attend a couple of them because, like, you're not wrong. Like, there's an energy there, and that energy is so freaking cool.
And I think it's great to have, security professionals from, the company that's hosting the live event to, also show the researchers, the other side of the security industry, either, from a department that is not their normal department for their day job, or for somebody who isn't in a security function, and to get to meet all these different people who come from different areas of security and to understand the space more and get a chance to talk to somebody who runs a SOC or a ProdSec function or an incident response function or even, a GRC function or an awareness function. I mean, there's a lot of people who get the opportunity to come out. And in fact, it's awesome to also bring, developers or, full stack engineers out on a product and to get to meet the hackers who are actively, trying to break into their systems ethically. That's always a fascinating connection to see how they interact with each other.
So I totally remember where my brain was going a little while ago. So I'm going to pivot back a little bit before we go forward. You had made a comment, they all walks of life, right? Some people do it from a living. And I remember reading a couple of reports from some of the platforms about like amounts of payouts and the amount of money that exists in bug bounty, which is absolutely like, it's there. But like, I wanted to get your take on it a little bit because there's a whole, like, there's a pretty wide disparity, and like, it's not necessarily easy to do it for a living, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you look at there are multiple bug bounty platforms out there. If you take one of them, say they have 600,000 or 700,000 people who have registered as somebody who would want to be a researcher. And then of that 600,000 or 700,000, there's only a small percent, let's say 10% maybe, who have ever even filed a bug. And then by the time you look at how many of them were not duplicates and actually got paid out, it's a much smaller percentage. And then you look at how many people got paid out more than once for multiple bugs, it's an even smaller percentage. And then you look at the top hackers. So some of the top hackers have amazing stories, where they're north of seven figures, and you got, folks in the million plus range. And these are the elite hackers. It is not the normal story for most hackers. So some are making a living at it. Some, like I said, could go 3 months, get one bug, and it's a duplicate, and then they got to start over again. So, it takes now. Actually, the nice thing is that there's so many more materials out now, even compared to 3 years ago, and certainly 5 or 6 years ago, where the communities come together. People are enabling each other with different techniques, different podcasts, different Twitter followings and advice and guidance on how to do this. Most of the major bug bounty platforms even have sort of an initial sort of hacker university where you can learn how to do initial recon and sort of start to hone your skills. And I'm hoping even for those folks who maybe aren't, super successful in bug bounty, by going through that initial process, they then maybe spark an interest, passion, and something they could pivot into, a career in a company. So this could be somebody who had a, comp sci degree and goes through that process and then can get an entry level position, or, somebody who just finds out they have, a real knack for it and they keep finding duplicates, but they're finding things, which means they would be, valuable in, say, a ProdSec function or a red team or one of those kinds of functions.
And you've had people who come from the community who have moved on to the team, right? Like, that's not necessarily a bad way to go.
Oh no, it's phenomenal. And in fact, I'm always looking for folks in the community who were interested in kind of pivoting over to a company, right? Either they've gotten burned out on just focusing on hacking, and they want to join a company, be part of a broader team, or they're just sort of interested in evolving their skills in cyber world and want to join an infosec function. But I think pulling people from the program from Bug Bounty World, that gives your program insight into the mind of the researcher and the trials and tribulations and the things you can do in your program to make sure that you're delivering the right amount of interaction and respect and communication with the researcher community to make your program thrive.
Sure. And I mean, a steady paycheck's not a bad thing. But on the topic of education, you actually have an event coming up, or Paranoids have an event coming up here pretty soon. That's an educational bug bounty event, correct? Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, I would absolutely love to. So we're really excited, actually. So we're getting ready to embark on a very interesting fall, and we have a pre-fall event. It's on September the 2nd. It's at 2 p.m. Eastern, and it is basically an introduction to hacking seminar. And we have an amazing program planned. I mean, we're going to do a quick overview on what bug bounty programs are. We'll provide a tutorial for how you can get started. So, the basics of ethical hacking and even setting yourself up on some of the major bug bounty platforms, along with advice on how to create bounty reports. And we have Ben Sajapur, or Nahamsek, who, just industry icon. He's been putting himself out there and delivering just amazing content to the community. He's partnered with us on delivering this seminar. And then we're wrapping, in between the different segments of the Intro to Hacking seminar, we've got some real world success stories from folks who've entered into cybersecurity and are thriving. And so they're going to share a little bit about their journey. And we're hoping that, anybody who's listening will be able to, envision themselves in the shoes of those individuals and realize that, a career in cyber and or in ethical hacking is, potentially at their fingertips. So that's from 2 to 4. And I think we're going to share a link for that in a little bit.
It will be in the description, and it will be on the website, so you can find it. And if you're particularly interested, one of those people that he mentioned is actually one of the interns in my department who's going to be sharing her story.
Yeah, she's fantastic, and we were just talking about before the podcast about this intern, and she, when we were talking about the program, her name immediately popped into my head because her story is phenomenal, her energy is great, and so I think I'm really interested to hear the success story and the way that she shares it in the seminar. So it should be a great show, and thanks for loaning her to us, Sean. We appreciate it.
I mean, I loaned her to you for the coins too, so.
That's right, actually. So, Sean and his intern helped build some of the crypto challenges and coins that we built for the year for the team. So, it's a great partnership, and happy to really have the intern on the seminar. So it's going to be good all the way around.
Thank you for that clarification, because Understudy's original statement about sharing her for the coins without clarification could come across a little bit as unintended.
Oh,
there.
God. My bad.
We need an HR edit right now.
My bad.
That's terrible.
So one of the things that I've noticed a lot lately is that kind of the bug bounty world has blown up, right? Like a couple of people had a couple programs. They'd have some public programs, but they were largely handled like in-house. And we've kind of seen this onset of like third-party services that kind of help do a lot of that stuff. So like what kind of things do those services provide? Like why would you go through a service or a specific platform? I mean, outside of you get specific hackers who are on that platform, but like what are the pros and cons of something like that if you want to cover that?
Yeah, I think every bug bounty program is going to have, a different budget and different operational needs. What the major platforms do for you is first, they give you that place where you can communicate with the researcher. So a place to track the disclosures that they're providing, and a place to comment back and forth. Some of them provide, triage services. So when the information, when the reports first come in, you can have some initial folks take a look at it. So it saves, your team from having to say, identify a duplicate or really have a report that's not reproducible. And that's one of the challenges. And in fact, I'm excited about the seminar starting to teach potential researchers about the right way to write reports so that you can work your way through the bug bounty system quicker and potentially get your payout sooner, or convert it from a report that wouldn't get a payout to one that would, because you've written it well and provided the right proof of concept and the right documentation, which is super important.
Even in bug bounty world, writing is important.
Isn't it? It's kind of amazing. And so I think spending some time really honing that part of the craft is really important. And some of the top researchers, that's one of the differentiators, is they have the ability to communicate the vulnerability and the impact and sort of show it in progress. That is really helpful. So there's those triage services. Then there's the payout management, which is, really tough. And, as a security professional, do you want to be spending time on sort of some of that back office work? Not necessarily. So, dealing with getting, the hackers, configured on the system, ready to submit, our ability to communicate with them, and then the ability to pay out. That's really valuable. And as well, the partnership and to understand what's happening, with the other programs and the rest of the community, and how to evolve and optimize your investment in bug bounty.
Nice. And then, so before we pivot and kind of tie all this stuff together, because I think that's going to be just amazing when we do, somebody's listening and they go, wow, I really think, after listening to this, we need a bug bounty program. Like, what advice do you have for people who might be kind of starting to explore the concept of having a bounty program?
I'm really thinking about sort of how you would embark from scratch. And so I'd say, if you were just thinking about where do I go, the first thing that I would probably do to understand the underpinnings of a typical program, there's a great white paper, I think it's from SANS, written by Jason Pubal on bug bounty programs. I think it was part of a master's thesis he had. It's maybe 25, 30 pages, but it gives you all of the sort of high points of how you would think about breaking out a bug bounty program. So you've got, what's your scope and what's the policy? One of the things, and I can't remember if you mentioned this in the paper, but an important thing is also to articulate your strategic objectives. Like, what you can stand up a bug bounty program, but what do you want it to do? Do you want to have the optics of having a bug bounty program, and be able to say say your customers that you have it, and that's maybe about it? And so you just want to stand it up and not really deal with care and feeding of it. Do you have a lower maturity product security function? So you want to shore that up first. So I'd say the first thing is you need to know a little bit about your risk posture on your products, and then determine which security activities you want to take on those products first before you potentially launch. The other thing you can do is you can do what are called private programs, where you maybe start out with 5 or 10 researchers. So you don't need to open it to the world or to thousands of researchers. You can open up to 20 and on a subset of your products, and sort of take it out for a spin, and then have this roadmap on how you would potentially launch it more deeply. But I would say every company really should have sort of a vulnerability disclosure program, so that as researchers show up and identify, hey, I found something on your platform or your product, there's a mechanism to deal with that. There are some companies I talk to, and they ask for my, advice in this space, and they say, I just got an email from somebody who says they can totally own my system and they have a vulnerability. What do I do? You don't want to be in that position, right? You don't want to be on the heels of your feet and not able to respond. You want to be in the balls of your toes and either have a bug bounty program or have a script for, how would I respond to this? Would I pull in legal? Would I do an initial analysis? Would I pump it through my incident response team? Do I have a vulnerability disclosure program that I could pump it through? Do I budget to pay for it? Do I want to just thank the researcher? What if things turn sour with the researcher, and the researcher's friendly at first and then gets really angry about a lack of response because you didn't have a game plan. So, these are the kinds of things that you can think about as you start to say, do I want a bug bounty program? What kind of program do I want? Let me research and understand what they are and see how does that fit with my organization's risk posture and my information security approach to dealing with, vulnerabilities in products.
So you got me all nice and happy. 1 second.
Yeah. When I got a question.
Hold on. Before we do a question, I have a statement. Because you got me all kinds of nice and happy because you said in a much more eloquent way than I ever do one of my favorite things of all time. You basically said, understand the mission, which is something that we talk about so damn much here.
Yeah.
Understand the mission and what you're trying to do. And that is so important in basically everything. But I'm so glad you said it. Anyway, go ahead, Exile.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So my follow-up question, Sean, is you were talking about the program itself, but what sort of businesses would you even consider a bug bounty program? Like size, industry, things like that. Like if they're considering, one of the questions is this something we should even be considering?
So Exile, the answer is yes. Right. So, I've seen that you can be a small company, large company, government, private sector, financial. It's all over the place. It really depends on, how do you perceive the value you can get from a bug bounty program, and is it the right investment for your organization? And Understudy was mentioning that several years ago, right, bug bounty programs weren't nearly as prolific as they are now. And I tell you what, 7-10 years ago, somebody contacted a company and said, "Hey, I was hacking you, and I found a vulnerability." It might get a letter from their attorney saying cease and desist, or we will, come to your house and arrest you. Right? Yeah. It's totally evolved now, but there are still some perspectives of, hey, we're not embracing a bug bounty program. We don't want hackers at the front gates. And my philosophy is you absolutely do. You absolutely want people testing your products and sharing with you any issues they're finding before somebody else who has a more malicious intent can do that. So why not do it? It's a fantastic thing, and I think embracing that and the diversity of thought and skill sets in the hacker community is an amazing thing to bring into your organization.
It goes back to exactly what I told the hackers in Vegas, right? No, you're not my enemy. I'm glad that you're here because you're not malicious.
It's almost like in this whole like playful contest back and forth between red and blue that everything that we all do helps to increase an organization's security posture.
Right? So the one other thing that I can say, and this is just my take, something that I've learned throughout this process, have dope swag. It helps. People love swag.
Swag is pretty awesome, and researchers are working really hard, and they get brands that they like out in the industry. In fact, I saw, oh my gosh, there was a Twitter thread around what's your favorite swag, like what companies do you like to get swag from, and people had opinions, and I'm sure Sean, if you weren't out there, I'd be shocked because I know your love of swag, and it is pretty awesome, and it's a way to get your brand out there and just to make it fun and bring some creativity to it's a hard field, right? So having some fun swag that you can bring with you and give out and bring some joy to researchers is pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
So what? Real quick, what's the swag that you like to give out specifically?
Coins.
Yeah, you are the coin man. We like to give away. I like to give away unique swag, and one of the guys in the team is just absolutely phenomenal at that. But we're always thinking about how is it either themed to the kind of event that we have, or how is it something that would be really useful? And actually, very coincidentally and shockingly, I think before COVID, I'm pretty sure it was before COVID was taking off at all in any way, we just because people are going on airplanes and dealing with some of our events are usually aligned with major industry events like a B-Sides or an RSA or Black Hat. So there's a lot of 50,000 of your closest friends who are showing up to these events. There's a lot of opportunity to get germs. So we had this little small hand sanitizer pack with the logo for our team, and it had a little sort of rubber rubber connector that would pop onto your either travel bags or laptop bag or whatever, and that has been the epic piece of swag in light of everything that's been going on. So
Right.
people have been super appreciative of their little especially when it's hard to find hand sanitizer. Boom, you had one of our little hand sanitizer kits, and that was great. So that was a shockingly good and well-timed piece of swag.
So I don't want to spend too much time on this because I want to tie it together. But do you have any really cool stories or like a cool story that you want to share? Or like just a cool experience from doing the program?
Oh my gosh, there are so many. I mean, I think the thing that blows me away is at the end of the live hacking events, they can end pretty late, 1, 2, 3 in the
Oh,
morning
I'm
sometimes.
well aware. Yeah.
Right. And there's a tradition by one of the folks in the community, and actually somebody who came over to the team, but to do a karaoke closeout to the night. So everybody gets together, both from the Bug Bounty platform, plus us as the customer and the researchers, and just tear it up until we get kicked out. And that's pretty awesome. Say there was one researcher, I pretty much met him once, and then the next time you see him, you get a great big hug. I mean, it's just these relationships that you build, and these special memories around solid technical acumen and really interesting creativity. I think there's sort of almost too many memories. I will say one of the recent ones that just definitely holds for me as being strong, and it's like not one singular memory, but it was a moment in time. We did the first virtual live hacking event on the platform. It was when COVID came out, and just before it was taken off, we realized that our next event, we were wrapping up an event at B-Side San Francisco, and we realized that we just couldn't have people travel. It wasn't fair to the researchers, wasn't fair to our staff. We were going to have to not do our live event, which was going to be at Black Hat Asia in Singapore. And so as we were huddling up, we said, you know what, let's try to do this thing virtual. And at the beginning of COVID, when we were locked down and everybody was trying to figure out what's happening, what does this mean for us, having the meaningfulness of a virtual event and getting together, although virtually, with the hacking community, and having that sense of purpose in that moment, and doing this thing virtually, which we hadn't done before and hadn't been done before, that was pretty awesome. And I remember some of the guys on the team just saying, this has been an incredible event. And one of them said it was their favorite event, even though, we were missing a lot of the odds and ends that come with being in person. I think because of the timing and the ability to get sort of on mission, working really hard, having great interactions, and doing it and getting distracted from the stressors of what was happening out sort of, in the rest of the world.
Sure. So to tie all this together, because, we talked a lot about ProdSec, we talked a lot about Bug Bounty, and I think it will be very beneficial to tie this together with this concept that I first heard from you, and you can correct me as to whether or not you invented it, but I feel like you did, but I could be wrong. This concept of the Bug Bounty life cycle, also known as how to not spend a shit ton of money on the same problem over and over again.
All right. Yeah, I don't know if the term itself was coined by me, but I think that the implementation and the way we've done it here for sure. And so the Bug Bounty Lifecycle, or what we call the BBLC, is this thing that we spun up when I was trying to carve out cycles from existing product security engineers to take a look at the bugs that were coming from Bug Bounty, and then see, as we surgically fix them, were they being fixed holistically both within the product and across the enterprise? And what were the TTPs of the researcher that led to finding that bug? And how could we incorporate that into our product security and engineering practices in the organization? And I found that in trying to do that, there was not enough cycles in the day for the people I was giving these assignments to. So they would have snippets of time to work on these things, and it was just hard for them to push those forward during the normal crush of security activities and operational work that we already had. So we decided to create this BBLC program and hire an engineer very specifically whose only job was to deliver on the analysis of the bug bounty incoming data, and then to spin up projects that we tracked from cradle to grave, and then look at the outcomes in terms of vulnerability, other vulnerabilities avoided, and other cost avoidance, and really risk avoidance fundamentally for the organization. And it's been tremendously successful. We have been able to, spin up dozens of projects that come from insight from bug bounty, and partner with our researchers to say understand how they found something, maybe create our own new custom rules in our code scanning, or spin up a whole new capability that interfaces with, say, dynamic analysis based on some of the telemetry that we're learning, and identify those bugs earlier and prevent them from being leveraged by adversaries. And when I say adversaries, I'm not talking about our good researchers. I'm talking about like adversaries. So,
yeah. And I mean, so it kind of goes into saying like, and you gave a whole talk at besides Nova about this. Is it Nova?
Yes.
So while we're only touching on it tonight, I'm literally looking for the talk, and I don't know if it ever got uploaded. So I would really like to link it. So if you have a link to it, that would be great. Because you gave a whole talk on this topic, and it was a really, really good talk.
I know there was some audio issues, and I'm not sure if they ended up uploading that particular talk.
Yeah, I don't think they uploaded mine either.
All right,
I only see a couple talks from 2020, but
right,
it was a really good talk.
Sophia, if you're listening, we need the Double Sean's talk. Your talk was awesome too, by the way.
I appreciate it.
That was my favorite talk. That was so good.
Yours was my favorite, so.
Oh.
Just
because you couldn't vote for yours.
No, because I've given mine before. But no, it's a really, really interesting concept, and it's that thing that we talk about on the defensive side of security constantly, right? Like we talk about how to anticipate and how to make sure that this thing that we saw here doesn't happen over here.
Right.
So it's really interesting as we talk about pulling that in that process. So like if you want to dive a little bit deeper into it, like feel free, or we can move into the detection. Your call.
Yeah, no, totally happy to. But I'll give you an example of there's two or three flavors that of BBLC. One of them is really, really obvious, right? So if you have, say, cross-site scripting in a specific parameter on a page, and you can fix that one, and you have 20 different parameters on the page, there's a good shot you might have 20 other cross-site scriptings, right? So you want to make sure that you're looking for and testing for those other ones that maybe the researcher just hasn't gotten around to submitting their report on yet. So that's one where the kind of vuln just exists in other places, and you just have to be smart and complete in how you address it. The second one is what technique did a researcher use, and can you evaluate that you didn't have that technique in your toolkit? And then you spend some time analyzing the report and realize that if you implemented a tool or implemented an update to one of your processes, you could suddenly find those vulns when you couldn't before, and not have to wait for the bug bounty researcher to identify it for you. And we did that coming out of an event. We actually specifically targeted our mobile products and offered sort of a bonus around finding vulns in the specific group of mobile applications. And we had one researcher whose sweet spot was mobile app testing as a passion of hers, and she's pretty awesome at it. And in the end, she found some things that really intrigued us. And we took a look at the framework that she was using to do her testing and the techniques that she used. And we were able to kind of fold that into our mobile application security program and identify those kinds of vulnerabilities moving forward. So that was huge. And then the last piece is, again, tuning our rules and or processes. So I'd say there was one example where we found the vulnerability came in from the researcher, and it was a product that we had looked at before, and we hadn't found that kind of vulnerability. And we deeply evaluated our processes and the way we're doing code scanning and code review, and we found sort of a little bit of a loophole in terms of what the scanner could and couldn't do. We made some tweaks, and then we were able to not only detect that one type of vuln, but we found it in other places, and we're able to eradicate it. So, I mean, I think it's a really powerful process and a solid investment. And the thing that's amazing from Bug Bounty is that you can actually, it's one of the few areas in security. Most often we talk about risk avoidance. It's really hard to talk about the return on investment for security, right? If I prevent 20 things from happening and nobody knows that I prevented those 20 things, how do I determine the return on that investment? But for Bug Bounty, I can actually count the things that could have been out there, could have manifested. I know their severity, I know their cost, so I can report to executives exactly how much money we have saved as a result of, the BBLC program. So it's a very compelling aspect of Bug Bounty and really rounds out the entire story. So I'm super pleased with where the program is, and it's pretty nascent. It's only been just over a year that the program has been out there, and it's already providing great value.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. So with that, we can probably move into the detection. And full disclosure, I know this one up front, but Exile, I'm going to let you take it off. But I have a lot to say about it because I'm really excited about this one, and I think it's really cool. So Exile, do you want to lead us into the detection?
Yeah, sure. So, Sean, you said at the beginning that you've been a fan of the podcast for a while, so you understand that we have this phase where we talk about a detection and we put the spotlight, the hot seat on our guests to do it for the week. So, what do you got for us?
Wow, it's a lot of pressure. Detection for the entire week.
Yep.
I'm going to dovetail back into what we were talking about maybe 20 minutes or so ago around the researchers and oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. It was so good, but it's gone. Oh shoot, I can't remember it. Anyway,
Quick, think of something else completely unrelated.
Yeah, no. So I got the detection. I had a perfect tie back, but it's gone. But I'll remember it tonight at 2 a.m. and jump up out of bed. But
be sure to send it on Twitter so we can tag it and let everyone know.
I actually remember now. So this is when we were starting up. You're starting up a Bug Bounty program, and what are some of the recommendations? And she sort of asked me, more at the top level, like how would you even get started? But I'd say one of the aspects that ties, kicking off a Bug Bounty program along with the notion of, what's a detection would be, having the researcher watermark their traffic so that, they've got either their researcher handle or something else in their traffic when they're testing so that you can sort of trace that activity through logs and you can confirm, a little bit more about the activity that's happening, correlate in logs and understand, is it coming from your Bug Bounty program? Which researcher is it? Does it tie back to a report that you saw?
I'm so very excited for this one, and this is why. So we'll pivot back into SOC land for a minute, like SOC and IR land, which is really our bread and butter, right? So if you have this massive number of researchers that's helping you find issues with your security like with your products, right? Like they're finding these vulnerabilities in your products. In another almost step of this life cycle thing, if researchers are tagging their traffic, you as an analyst looking for attackers can basically correlate what the researchers are doing that works. You can take some of that information. You can look in your logs for that tag traffic, see exactly what they did, where your gaps are, what that looks like, what you see and what you don't see, and you can make some really, really informed security decisions off of that data about what you might need visibility into, or where you're lacking in detection posture, or where you might need some additional detections and things of that nature. Because for all effective purposes, they're acting as an adversary, or as an adversary would. So you're getting the insight and the ability to track it in a completely safe way, like you would with a red team, except instead of one person or three people, it's, up to 600,000 people that you're getting this level of visibility that you never had before. And it's just, it's so cool. And I love it.
And with the added benefit that because it's being done through a known business program, it gives you the extra business justification that's needed to push through your ideas.
Yeah, it's so cool, and I love it. I just love it.
Yeah, and it forces the researchers need to want to elevate their game, and so they don't want to be, just like a red team, they don't want to be detected by the internal teams, and so they can also evolve their research and sharpen their skills, as a result of what they learn about how quickly an organization can respond and identify what they're doing on the network.
Exactly. It's just phenomenal. That's one of my favorites. I get very excited about some of this stuff because what you're talking about is a very novel thing. Like, it's not something you really ever hear people talk about that much. And it's such a cool way to understand visibility on the detection side too, and understand gaps and understand all kinds of stuff.
It does that thing that we search for is like the holy grail on the detection side of being able to learn and write detections that actually show the TTPs.
Exactly. So, with that one being said, Mr. Porras, any last statements, pieces of advice, last words, thoughts, gripes, comments, concerns, whatever?
No, nothing. I'd say one thing that showed up just this week, and I thought it was really timely, and it's a common one, but is just as you're going about your normal day, both personally and professionally, as you deal with other people with other issues that they're dealing with, assume no ill intent. Work through any challenges, or identifying yourself any preconceived notions you might have in interacting with somebody to yield a more positive interaction. And it's very rare that somebody actually has in their interactions with you, professionally or personally, true malicious intent. It's usually a miscommunication of some kind. So I'd say that's just one tip. I saw it happen a couple times this week where people got fired up, and I said, hey, hang tight. Let's understand where they're coming from. And sure enough, it was just a basic miscommunication. Helped avoid one person have a lot of stress and the other person get chewed out. And, it was all really healthy interactions. So
I want to say that and get back to work or work harder are old CISO's catchphrases.
Work faster, right?
Work faster. That's it. Work faster. And assume no ill intent.
That's a good one.
With all that said, I think this has been a phenomenally informative episode in all the best ways possible. Like, no bullshit, man. I could listen to you talk about this stuff for basically ever, because this shit and I don't know this shit. So it's really nice for me to learn.
So the listeners, you are now hearing Understudy fanboy out as we record.
That's very true. I love listening to Porras talk about this stuff because he really knows it, and it's not my strong suit. All right.
We know where you stand at this point.
I like to learn.
Well, hey, it's mutual. I mean, it's really enjoyable to, cross-pollinate, and I don't know how often you have, like you said, product security or bug bounty on the show, but even just, in the hallways when we used to have them, or, now in Hangouts or whatever, always awesome to, learn more about security. And I tell you what, every time I, guest present at a different department's team meeting, and I see their language and the way they work and their focus on security, it's always fascinating to me because it's fresh and it's a different perspective on what we're all trying to do. So, I think I laud you guys for, bringing on a prod secker and a bug bounty guy onto detections and making it a really fun chat. So thank you. And thank you for what you're doing for the industry and putting yourselves out there and having these conversations. Really appreciate it.
Of course. We forgot to mention before we close, how can people find you if they want to talk more, or if they just, want to know you? You do want to know him. He's awesome.
Appreciate that, man. Yeah, I got two places I spend a good amount of time. So LinkedIn, you can just find me there, and Sean Porras, Poris, and I'm also on Twitter at SKP00. And those are probably the best ways to get in touch and share some ideas.
Cool. And we will link those as well. Exiled, closing thoughts before I take us out?
Go ahead, take us out.
All right. Again, Sean, thank you so much for coming on. This has been great. Lot of good information. I hope everybody finds this useful. Also, I strongly encourage everybody to check out that introduction to bug bounty thing that's happening next week, or the introduction to hacking seminar. I think it's going to be a really awesome seminar. Links will be available, sign up sheet, all that good stuff. On that note, it is time for all of you to go forth and find badness.